Hello and welcome to Aristeia 99. Tonight, we're talking about Maximus. Maximus is a tank. He is a defender. He is the guy that you want on your team if you want to help protect your teammates or if you really just want to block up an area. He is a fantastic character. He's very forgiving, but he's a little tricky. So let's start off with his attributes. He has initiative of 4. He has a movement of 3, which makes him actually the slowest character in the game to date. He has an energy of 5 and he has a health of 7. Now that's really impressive all around just to begin with. When you get to his defensive dice, he's got probably some of the best defense in the game. He gets to roll 1 green die, so that's a specialization in defense. He gets to roll a blue die, which is an additional defensive die. Very good. But he also gets 1 automatic block. So no matter what, he will block 1 success. That's really nice. The next 2 things to look at would be his brawl, coming in again at a green and a blue. Now he gets 2 dice. Not every character gets 2 dice for their brawl stat. Likewise, not every character gets 2 dice for their disengage roll. This means he's going to be very effective at stopping other characters attempting to leave adjacency from him. So if you put him right next to someone, he's got a very good chance of keeping them there. This is great for tying up areas. This is great for blocking areas. Disengage rules are really awesome. If you just get him one more person, one more ally, he would get to add a black die to that. And that just makes a great situation for you even better. The next thing you'd want to look at too, though, is going to be his disengage. He gets 1 automatic success. So basically, he is virtually unstoppable unless a character attempting to make the disengage roll with him, or in this case, the brawl roll, has a green defensive die. The only way he can be stopped is if your opponent managed to roll a critical block and basically remove that. Next to note will be his switch, and this is going to be very important. For 1 defensive, 1 block, and 1 exclamation point, he will impose taunted to the target. So as a tank and with high defense and with a lot of health, the ability to impose taunt means that you're going to be forcing an opponent to waste attacks on him because he's going to be very hard to hurt and he can take a heck of a pounding. That's really important. What's also important to know is he can only get this from his switch. The only way for him to taunt is basically rolling that, so whether he's doing that in a brawl roll, whether he's doing that in a defensive roll, or using Jotun's shield, his one and only attack. That is how you would get taunted on to somebody. Now looking at Jotun's shield, it comes in with a red die, a blue die, and a black die. So it has some damage potential, but it is primarily a defensive thing to do. It is very safe for him to do, as a matter of fact. So if someone's next to you, you've got a 1 in 6 chance of getting a critical success to guarantee do 1 damage. You got a chance of doing 2 damage. But really, I think the biggest thing that the red die here contributes actually is its exclamation marks. When you also look at the blue die, you've got exclamation marks. You've also got blocks, obviously, and a smattering of successes. And of course, the black die only contributes defensive block results. Now, why does that all matter? Well, the switch for Jotun's shield takes 2 exclamation marks, and that lets you displace the target. So when you're using this particular attack, yes, you can get there's a chance of you getting damage in. But really, and you can buff that up, say if you have a character like Hannibal or Lakshmi, if you want to use a tactic cards. There are ways to get you more dice. But it almost seems like a waste to be using Maximus to do damage. If you have to, you have to. What you can do, though, is displace the targets and put them into a situation that is less favorable than the one they're already in. Jotun's shield has a 1-1 range, so basically they're already adjacent to Maximus. You don't want to displace them away from you necessarily, although situations could come up where that would be desirable. For instance, if a character is already gone and they're in the scoring zone, you can displace them out of the scoring zone. But what you can also do is use that to displace a character. Say you have Maximus, an ally, and between the two, you have an enemy, say Musashi. What you could do then is displace Musashi so he's only adjacent to Maximus and not adjacent to your ally. And that helps preserve the ally. It's a way of it's manipulating your enemy's position. It is a form of soft control. And this is great. Now, he's got 2 orange abilities. These are passive abilities. These are abilities that happen. You got to remember to do it. And if you look through our gameplay, you can see we forget sometimes. But these always happen and they're free. The first one is Get Behind Me. So if an ally is about to suffer wounds, you can actually suffer it for them. So if in that example, say you have Maximus and Hexer next to each other, and Musashi's got a brutal attack in on Hexer, you can take that damage onto Maximus instead of Hexer taking it. This is great. This is kind of represents the way he would shield guard somebody. He's got that big old shield, so he bodyguards for them. Now, I believe it has been said that you can decide how that's split up between Maximus and the original target. You don't have to soak up all the damage on Maximus. So this is a very good thing. Now, that being said, it can put you in tricky situations where you'll have to make hard decisions based on what's going on. If Maximus is low on health, but you got a high priority target right next to him, say Pavarti or Wild Bill or any other characters that, depending on the scenario, you could have to choose between letting one of them live and the other one die. And that can be really tough sometimes. And I know personally as a player, I have tried to force these decisions before. It is one way to get at Maximus is actually, ironically, through his allies. The next ability ties into this. It's called Implacable. So immediately after an enemy declares an attack against an ally other than Maximus, you may displace yourself. Now again, we mentioned that Maximus has a movement of 3. But because of this ability, you can go in a single round, not turn, but in a round, he can potentially move 4 additional, displace himself 4 times. So total movement could be as high as 9 hexes in a given round, which that's really good for getting in position. But part of the way you can use this is getting closer to allies or getting closer to, say, a scoring zone. Certainly in the game with versus Primus, what he was using to very good effect was he would position two allies close to each other and have Maximus switch between them using Implacable to actually be able to protect them both fairly evenly, even though they weren't necessarily adjacent to each other. So with a bit of positioning trickery, you can actually get a lot of mileage out of Maximus. Now, looking at all this, he does have a number of tactics that go along with him. First off, block, and you will get to add 2 blue dice to a roll. This can be used offensively or defensively, which pretty much like any of the tactics can. So even if you're, say, making an attack with a normally risky character, this tactic from Maximus would help alleviate that. Also, if he has to do something like, say, use Contender, adding this gives him a lot better chances of succeeding, plus it keeps him relatively safe. We also have Adamantine, nullify all successes on an opponent's roll. Now this is obviously an amazing card to have. This is an amazing tactic. But first off, this has to be used after the switches are figured out. Secondly, this has to be used only by Maximus. So while this is an amazing card, it is a drawback in that it doesn't necessarily help with your overall deck. It is a character-specific card. Now that's great and would find a home in most any strategy, but that is something you need to keep in mind. Third tactics card from him would actually be called Freeze. You can immobilize a taunted target. Now this can be used in any character's activation and would synergize really quite well with not only Maximus, but any character that can taunt. So it is worth picking up if movement is something if you have a character that already taunts or multiple characters that taunt, this I think would be an easy add-in. Finally, for his tactics would be Scram, and this could be during any character's turn, and you would displace all the targets adjacent to the active character. Now, obviously, this can be very good for Maximus, but say if you have a character that's getting ganged up on, such as Gata, who's not really an offensive character, or Bavardi, or someone like that, doing that right then would give you some breathing room. You don't necessarily want to be attacked. Likewise, say you're playing against Gaia, who will put out these minions who their main purpose is to serve as blockers. So a character could get in the middle of all of them if they're too close together, play Scram, and just basically open up that lane or that avenue so other characters can get in. So there's a great amount of utility in there, and I've seen that be a major factor in how some rounds play out. If you're playing, say, King of the Hill, or if you're towards the end of a normal round of Assault, this can be a very useful card to clear out a scoring zone so you get it all to yourself. Likewise, you might also want to decide, hey, I'm going to use this to herd these other characters towards someone else. And that's perfectly great. That's wonderfully valid. So these are all tactics that Maximus has. You'll only be able to choose 2 in a game. And likewise, your opponents, if they're using Maximus, will only be able to use 2. But he's got some pretty good cards. Just be careful of Adamantine and remember that the drawback to it, because it is a very powerful card, is it is only usable by Maximus. Now, obviously, Maximus is a fantastic tanking character, but one character does not a team make. So he is great to partner up with, I think, from our experience so far, if you need someone who can help you control an area and lock down other characters. He is a great form of control. Similar to, say, City Heroes, where, there are specialties for characters. You got tank, you got DPS, you got support, you've got ranged DPS, whatever. Maximus is a tank, that's his specialty, but part of the way he does that is he also controls. And he controls that way. So by preventing your opponent's teammates from moving about freely, he protects your characters. So if you can keep him next to a target that Major Luna can thereby go ahead and snipe. You'll go well with characters that can provide him additional buffs. Lakshmi would be great because she can add focus, for instance, that gives an yellow dye. If you pair him up with Hannibal, that'll give him an orange dye, a little more damage potential. There are things like that to think about. A character such as Hexer or Bavardi. Hexer can move him around and get him into position that much faster to help make up for his relatively low speed. In addition, would complement well his implacable trait. If you were to pair him with Bavardi, obviously he's going to appreciate any healing he can get, and the fact that she can clear off states is going to be very important. Maximus can still move around via implacable if he's immobilized, but if he's immobilized, then he can't really get the most mileage out of him. Someone like Padre Mendoza, great healer, good matchup with Maximus, and really the fact that Maximus can protect the relatively squishy Padre, who's there piling on stacks and stack of burning, is going to be great. A character like Dart would go well with him as well, because he can prevent enemies from getting to Dart, so she can become hidden and her damage output increases. There's a lot of give and take over here. There's a lot of possibilities with Maximus. So if you haven't checked him out yet, go ahead. You can find his card along with cards of all the other characters on www.aristeiathegame.com. They also have a full wiki there, which you can check out. So this has been Aristeia99. Tonight we've been talking about Maximus. Look forward to talking to you soon, and see you next time.